want to thank Secretary Salazar for actually initiating, having the first ever meeting from the Department of the Interior to actually look at the invisibility of women's history and how we correct that. We are happy that he can be in our site. We hope this space is a model. And most of... He didn't warn me. Okay, can you hear me better? Yes. Sorry about that. And most of you know our concern here is an integrated approach to women's history. We started working in 1980 and opened these temporary doors. We are thrilled to have Secretary Salazar in the department looking at a national perspective. We know he has great notes from the meeting. And I understand he also has 2 daughters and a granddaughter. Is that correct? So he has special vested interest for the future. And we are proud in Maryland, being the first in many ways, but having a wonderful mayor of the city of Baltimore, the first lady who was very clear about not just being identified as First Lady, but being Judge O'Malley. And all
the panel, and the funny thing about it is, if somebody wouldn't have mentioned it to them, I don't think they would have even noticed. And that is what we are fighting against today. So, I think it is so important to tell these stories. It remains important that we have these discussions for us now and for women and Americans to come. And for that reason, I want to thank the Secretary for being here, be it the history and the contributions of African Americans, American Latinos, or Americans' women heritage. You have made telling the story of all of America's people important. And for that, I thank you. And I would like to now bring to the podium our Secretary of the Interior, Secretary Salazar.
Thank you very much. You're fortunate to have a great mayor and Stephanie here in Baltimore. Give her another round of applause. Judge, let me just say, I don't like that term First Lady either, because she's a judge in her own right, a power in her own right, and I've known her family for a long time because they have been great supporters of me even when I was running for the U.S. Senate. So thank you so much, Katie, for being here today and for being a part of this conversation. Give her a round of applause. And to our host, Jill, and so much of her passion, which is embodied here in the center. Thank you for hosting us. Let's give her a round of applause. A lot of people here, but let me just introduce just a few people. Rachel Jacobson, my Assistant Secretary for Fish, Wildlife, and Parks. One of the great women that works with me in the Department of Interior and oversees about 33,000 people now in the National Park Service and the Fish and Wildlife Service. And to her left is Stephanie Toothman. Stephanie is the head of our Cultural Resources Program in the National Park Service. And then Peggy Odell, the Deputy Director of National Parks, is somewhere around here. She's probably figuring out our plans for our next steps. And just quickly, a couple of other people who've been so helpful to me in organizing this event. Nanafwa Embo, where are you? Here. You're back here. Nanafwa, raise your hand. You're one of those young women. She's 24 years old. She's going to be President of the United States one of these days. And then Christina, come over here. Show you Christina and Jonathan, come up here. These are all my staff. And then Melissa Schwartz, who worked with Senator Mwhc, and in fact she was one of the find this today. Thank you. And Tammy Heilman from the Department of Interior. Let me just quickly say a few things. First, the President has been very clear to me since I took this job as Secretary of Interior that as a member of his cabinet, one of the things that I should do in the National Park Service is to make sure that we were telling the story of all of America. He is a strong believer in an inclusive America, that no matter who you are, no matter where you're from, no matter what your history is, it's important that that history be told. And yet, as I came into the Department of Interior, it became clear to me that there was still a tremendous amount of work for us to be doing with respect to the heritage of all Americans, so that at the end of the day, we're telling everybody's story, because no one story is more important than others. No one story is superior to that of anybody else. But the fact of the matter is, when you look at the first several centuries of our country, we have not done a very good job at telling the story of all of America. And so it has been with great pride as Secretary of Interior that I've taken that part of our mission, being the custodian of America's history, to a sense of great importance within our department. And it has led to a number of different things. In African American history, which is a history which was long neglected in this country, today I can say proudly that under this president, we have now moved forward with the creation of the 396th National Park in Southern Virginia, Fort Monroe, which marks the beginning and the end of slavery, the place where the first African American was born, the place that became the crucible for Abraham Lincoln's sinking on the Emancipation Proclamation. We moved forward with the Martin Luther King National Memorial on the National Mall, right between the Lincoln Memorial and the Jefferson Memorial. And just a few weeks ago, we broke ground on the African American Museum at the Smithsonian on the National Mall, and construction is underway. And so what we have done there, we need to do in other places of our country as well. Japanese Americans, for example, have contributed greatly to our history. Senator Danny Inouye, who is, from my point of view, one of our true living heroes of America, the winner of the Medal of Honor in World War II, now was 84 years old. A great friend of mine. When you see him on the Senate floor, he doesn't have an arm. And that was because that arm was blown off in his heroic efforts fighting for the defense of freedom and the defense of this country in World War II. And yet he, as a Japanese American, was told that he could not fight on behalf of his country. So as he tells a story, and he would make you all come to tears if you were listening to his story, he tells his effort at getting people to sign the petitions in Hawaii to allow them to form a Japanese American military battalion. And he said the proudest day of his life was when he received a letter from President Roosevelt, which told him that a proclamation had been signed that they could go ahead and form a military battalion. That battalion became the most decorated history, the most decorated group of military personnel in the history of the United States of America. And so today, when we celebrate the Japanese American internment camps, which are going on in this country, it's also a reminder to us that there were other chapters of that history. And so just last week, we put in a significant amount of money to celebrate 12 of these internment camps so that we can remember that also painful chapter of America's history. And so today, for Women's History Month, it seemed to me that more than us just having some kind of a celebration within the Department of the Interior in Washington, D.C., that what we ought to do is that we ought to have a dialogue about how we ought to make sure that we tell the story of the contributions of women across America in a much more thorough and a much more thoughtful way. And so that's what we are here to kick off today, and that's what we were having a meeting about, to talk about some next steps on how we can do some of the great things that you've done here in Maryland and take them across the country, how we can develop the information that is needed to really be able to tell the story of American women as part of the tapestry of American history. Because we all know, no matter who we are, no matter what our backgrounds are, that the only reason that we are here, frankly, is because it is women who have made it all possible. And we will see the day when we do have women president of the United States, a woman. And I think it's not. There's a lot of other barriers that we have to overcome. I was thinking about Senator Mwhc when she was celebrated, rightfully so, as being the longest serving woman in the United States Congress. That I believe in the U.S. Senate now, where I served, we only have, I think, 12 members of the U.S. Senate who are women. And so yet you think about this body that shapes our national policy has so much of an impact on all the 307 million Americans and people throughout our world, throughout our planet. And that underrepresentation will, over time, be overcome. And we will have a better sense of balance in that great deliberative body in Washington, D.C. So I would like to get some ideas from you. I've heard from a lot of the people who I met with earlier about some of their ideas about how we move forward. But here's a couple of things just to start you out with. Peggy, Odell, Rachel Jacobson, and others have recommended that what we do is we move forward with a national collaborative on the National Historic Landmarks effort. It's really patterned after what happened here in the Northeast region, but to make it go across the nation. Now, let me tell you what that means. What it basically means is that the National Historic Landmarks that we give are the highest designation that is given to any particular place in the United States of America. It's an authority which I have as the Secretary of Interior today. And yet, when you look at the history of the United States and our historic landmarks, only about 4% of those historic landmarks reflect the important contribution of women across the United States of America, only about 4%. And so what we are committing to do today is to move forward with what will be an initial chapter of expanding this collaborative to take it all the way across the nation so that we can identify those landmarks that deserve recognition by the United States of America as those historic landmarks that reflect the contribution of women. The second thing that we will do is to build on that, and hopefully under Rachel and Peggy's and Stephanie's leadership, what we will do is to put together a theme study of a kind that will allow us to tell that story of the contribution of women across the country. There are other ideas that we want to pursue, and we'll be hopefully inviting you to come to something in the not too distant future as well. But at the end of the day, our efforts here are really to make sure that women feel that their history is being recognized, because it is important for our history and for our heritage. But also, it's about our future. It's about our daughters and our granddaughters and those who have not yet been born, who someday will be able to born into a world where there won't be the kinds of ceilings and the kinds of barriers that they have felt in history. It should not matter that you are born in this world as man or woman in terms of the opportunities that you ultimately have. But so much of that, in my view, is dependent also on us being able to reflect the history and contributions that have been made. And frankly, for too long, the history of women, the history of African Americans, Japanese Americans, and others, really has not been given the kind of importance that it should have been given. Much of that history has either been swept under the rug or simply has not been recognized. I was having a conversation in our earlier meeting with one of my friends from the Smithsonian Institute, and we need to do more in the Smithsonian to make sure that it's being relevant to the United States of America. Our director of the National Park Service, when President Obama and I appointed him to be the director of the National Park Service, said that his highest priority, and I have his letter at my desk that I keep pulling out every once in a while as we have conversations about his promises, but it's about making the National Park Service relevant to the 21st century. Well, the way we make the National Park Service relevant to the people of this country in the 21st century is to make sure that the National Park Service, as it tells the story of America, is telling the story of all of America. Yes. And so that's what I am committed to doing here as we celebrate in Baltimore, Maryland, the Women's History Month, but also looking ahead so that it's not just a month of celebration, but hopefully we'll be able to put this into an action plan that will truly celebrate the contributions of women and also be an educational instrument in our schools and in our society that can inspire the next generation of women and all of their leaders. So with that, let me just open it up to any questions or comments that any of you may have. It is now 4 o'clock, and I know we're supposed to end at 4 o'clock, and I don't know what the mayor's schedule is or the judge's schedule. But here's the deal. When I come to do these town halls, I'd like to give everybody a chance who has a comment to give that comment to me. And I have one closing comment that I'm going to give, and then Rachel's going to close it. So let me start with Megan. Sure.
First of all, I'm a graduate student, I'm an archaeologist at the University of Maryland, and I want to thank you for coming personally to have this discussion with us. I had the privilege of doing some archaeology at women's rights, and the superintendent is actually here. I have two comments, and the first is that when you think about women's history, that you interpret not just the elite women's history, but that you interpret all women's history, and so the workers and the laborers, the people whose stories usually don't get told. And also, I was wondering, because the National Park Service is not the only agency that has cultural resources, is if you have any plans, for example, the properties with Fish and Wildlife or Bureau of Land Management, to interpret those as far as women's history goes as well.
Okay, thank you very much, Megan. Elizabeth?
I just wanted to make a suggestion of a way to get the information out to the population, and that is at the National Library of Medicine, we've developed a very easy and inexpensive way of taking exhibitions and making them around to, for example, we had an exhibition on, it was called Changing the Face of Medicine, celebrating America's women physicians. And we mailed that to 80 libraries around the country. Very inexpensive and very popular. So you could take something like this behind you and put it into this format for mailing.
Good. Part of getting the message out. Okay, got that. Thank you, Elizabeth. Deanna?
Hello, I'm an ESOL teacher at Jackson Road Elementary School in Silver Spring, Maryland. And about 60% of our population is Hispanic, and so I was teaching them about women's history and sharing information with them. And the boys kind of got all like, well, why are we learning about girls? But then when I started teaching them about an astronaut named Ellen Ochoa, they saw the cultural relevance. And so as we begin or continue to explore and share the relevance of women and the role they play in history, we need to think about the relevancy of the different cultures and the contributions of the different cultures. Because it transcends and goes across to different genders.
Thank you very much, Deanna. Brianna?
Hi. As a Girl Scout of Central Maryland and a student at the Institute of Notre Dame, which is right here in Baltimore, I wanted to know what the schools are doing to encourage leadership, political interests, and otherwise for young girls in Baltimore and in the state in general.
Okay. Thank you, Brianna. Nancy?
Yes, Mr. Secretary, Nancy Shamu. I work for the National Conference of State Historic Preservation Officers, and I'm here to pledge to you all that the State Historic Preservation Officers are rolling up their sleeves. Sorry, this is a little tight. I'll pledge to Stephanie and to Paul that we're ready to help you make this possible. Money is important, but in historic preservation, if you let money be your requirement, nothing would happen. So you've got our pledge to help in every state across the country.
We have a safe house in Baltimore County, and we do a Harriet Tubman presentation every year. We have for 6 years, combined with another gentleman who's done it for 12 years. We tried to get it into the schools somehow, that they would start a program, and we tried 3 schools. This past year, we have our first school in Baltimore County that is going to have a Harriet Tubman Day of Remembrance. And I think if every school had one of these, we could endorse women and get the word out.
Thank you, Shirley. Claire?
You asked for suggestions. I'm from National Gothic Space Flight Center, and I've been working with the Maryland Women's Heritage Center on their exhibit here on STEM careers. And I think that the effort that we did together in terms of highlighting STEM careers for women has been so positive, and it's definitely because of the Maryland Women's Heritage Center initiation of this project, but it's gotten out the word to so many young kids that STEM careers can be exciting. And even though I know that you're not focused on the STEM careers, if you or one of your assistants could take these two main products that we came out with. These posters are the set of posters that are already there, but little versions. They want to go through in terms of suggested framework of how to do some of your outreach. So thank you for everything you're doing.
Thank you very much. Andra.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but to your extreme left, and I'm Anna Maria, I'm docent here at the center, but just in terms of STEM, there were a group of young ladies, 25 of them came Saturday, and all that rain and mess we had here with our weather. But when they got to that section of the room where they saw all those young people listed up there pictorially, they're from Philadelphia. They're going back. They went back, and they were so impressed with looking at the presentations from Goddard and that piece back there that's interactive. So more interactive pieces available to the sites,
Okay.
regardless of the content, but in terms of identifying young people, really made a difference.
Thank you very much. Andra.
Yes. I'm the president of the Women's Industrial Exchange. We are one of those small organizations that Sally was talking about. We were founded in 1880 in Baltimore. We own a historic building, and our mission is still the same now as it was then, which is to provide a venue for women who are in need of an income who do crafts, to sell their crafts. And so we have a building, we have a gift shop, we have a restaurant that just reopened called the Women's Industrial Kitchen, all women run. Our big issue is that we do not have an executive director. We have a volunteer board, and we really are scraping by, month by month just to survive. And so our board actually is doing the work of an executive director. So we can get funding for renovations, that money does come through, but we have a very difficult time finding funding for staff. So grants to hire, or, if the money is not there, I know how bad money is, internships or executive directors on loans.
So cost beyond just the physical facility.
Yes,
Thank you,
yes.
Andra. Now,
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. I've edited my comment and questions and suggestions down to 1 minute, 5 seconds. I threw in 5 seconds because my daughter lives in Aurora. I'm a public historian that's worked in the far western Maryland counties for 35 years, and I also work with the Maryland Women's Heritage Center. In 2007, I was asked by the Business and Professional Women's Club of Cumberland, about 150 miles west of here, to make a presentation on historic women of western Maryland for the March meeting. I thought, no problem, I only had a week, that there'd be a list of documentation, somewhere I'd find some information. Couldn't find a thing. I gave a program, but more importantly, since that time, and in cooperation with the nonprofit Western Maryland Regional Library, we've been able to develop a website with over 250 women from Western Maryland. It's been linked to colleges, universities, educational institutions across the country. We also did a similar one on African American history. And I'll be real honest with you, I have surveyed the literature from California, I haven't looked at Colorado because I'm sure it's great, all the way to New York, and I've not seen anything like it. It's something that could be replicated in any community with any nonprofit type of organization. 2 quick examples. Jane Gates, the great-great-grandmother of Dr. Henry Louis Skip Gates. His great-great-grandmother bought a house in Cumberland, Maryland, 1871 after she was freed. The first African-American woman to have a bank account in Western Maryland, and she is the largest property owner in the city of Cumberland for African-American families. Skip and I and his cousin are attempting to get that house on the National Register as we speak. We'll do it. Hannah Cressup, and this is fun, who in the Maryland boundary dispute with Pennsylvania during the 1730s was often seen on horseback in full battle array, leading a charge with saber, musket, and flugelhorn. Hannah even once denied the request of a candle to the Pennsylvanians so they could examine the leg wound of a member of their party, and instead cried out that she was not only glad that he had been wounded, but would have preferred the wound had been to his heart. Anyway, that's about the only comment I would have, and this may be a little bit out of your bailiwick. When I do all this research, I rely on the internet. And this relates to this. In conducting historical research, most recently on women's history and accessing resources, I have learned the value of broadband and modern telecommunications technology. something that many parts of rural America and the interior lack. I cannot overemphasize the importance of having this technology available to all our students. I know that's not directly under your bailiwick, but
I'm involved in all that stuff.
add a voice to that and have a copy of my comment. I'm driving 200 miles back, that's why I'm talking like this.
So here's the deal. We're going to take your ideas, some of which we've been gathering here in this historic meeting in Maryland, and we're going to transform them into an action plan that I will then implement with my 72,000 people that work for Rachel and Peggy. And we will try to figure out ways of bringing in others on the cabinet, including my partner, colleague, and friend Arnie Duncan at the Department of Education. And we will work with others to see what our next step will be. But this is not intended to be the end of Women's History Month, because to me it really is a call to action. And let me just finish. My staff does a wonderful job writing great speeches for me. And I have a written speech, but I was actually going to read it because it was so good. But I do want to just read a little piece of it because I think it'll tell you part of why I am here. So this is what they wrote. Before we begin, I have to tell a story about one of my predecessors as Secretary of the Interior, Robert McClelland, who served for 4 years under President Franklin Pierce in the 1850s. It so happens that a precocious young woman took a job at the U.S. Patent Office as a recording clerk. The Patent Office was then a part of the Interior Department, and remarkably, she was paid the same as her male counterparts, $1,400 a year. Unfortunately, Robert McClelland found out about her. He did not believe that women should be allowed to work in government offices. And so he promptly demoted her and cut her salary. This ultimately led to her position being eliminated. So I have to apologize to you all for my predecessor, who was blind to the many talents of this young woman, whose name was Clara Barton. I promise you that President Obama, Michelle Obama, and I will do better. Thank you. Also note, this is just another, the Interior Department, it shows in my mind how our history, and it's so important to know it, is really a march towards a more perfect humanity and a more perfect union. So it's much later, almost 100 years later, that Rachel Carson came to work as a biologist in what was a predecessor agency to the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. And I dare say today that Rachel Carson's Silent Spring and her work on conservation have made her one of the conservation icons, not only of the United States, but really of the world. And we need to build off of her story and the stories that we see unfolding today to make sure that we do become a much more perfect union. So with that, I want to thank you.
And the way you address these issues. This is for you, all about women's history. But also, we have our historic Maryland women here to give gifts to the women who worked with us on your staff, who were so wonderful. Christina. And is Terry here?
Christina. Terry Thompson.
Terry Johnson. These are the 3 women we worked with, and so we want to recognize them too.
Thank you.
Thank you.